Hello, everybody. This is Tony from Two Copper Pieces. I'm the beardless one. And in this episode, very exciting because we're going to actually paint some minis rather than simply piece them together. And I've done a couple like that previously. But here I'm going to be painting them in my style. I'm not going to be following the style provided in the book. Here's an example of one before. And before we get to grips with that, you'll see there's a lot of cracks where the seams join. I'm going to be trying to do my best to smooth these over in a very lazy and quick way, using a bit of the plastic glue that they provide. That plastic glue actually melts the plastic quite well, which creates a really strong bond when you push it together, and therefore can also be used to maybe smooth over some of the cracks. Not smooth them over brilliantly. If you're going to do this properly, you'd use some maybe Milliput to hide the seams, use some sandpaper to sand it down afterwards. I'm here just adding it in places to try and give it a bit of strength. That cauldron is appalling. The crack is probably about 1 millimeter wide, which in miniature scale is very big. But what can you do? In this episode, we'll be painting 4 Xandir's Truth Seekers minis, and that's from issue 10. We'll also be painting a Swamp Color Shaman, Swamp Caller, this guy, and his little friend that stirs the pot, whatever he's called. Those are from issue 9. Be starting with a black base coat. This is primer actually as well. Acrylic polyurethane surface primer by Vallejo. I have 1 bottle of this, which is 200 milliliters. I must have primed hundreds of miniatures with this, and I've still got some left. It's also good to run through an airbrush, so you can do that if you like. I actually prefer to prime them with a brush. Find it a little bit more thorough, easier to get. Easier not to miss anything, more consistent. Once we've done that, I'll be dry brushing. So this is, I think, Don Serratos refers to it as sketching. Now, he's a very excellent mini painter that I've picked up a lot of skills from and a lot of tips. I don't meet his standard at all because I'm much more about painting quickly, but I think he calls it sketching. A lot of people call it zenithal highlighting. That's where you try and make it seem like the light is coming from a certain direction, and your lighter shades will be at the lighter points, and the recesses will be darker because the light doesn't quite reach them properly. Using a soft brush, I'm kind of dry brushing a light grey all over the mini, but I'm picking out some points to try and be lighter than others as I go. Through this method, if you use glaze paints or contrast paints or something like that, they will naturally be brighter over the lighter parts and darker over the darker parts, therefore giving excellent shadow and depth, while you basically have to just color the mini in. It's like adults coloring in. And it's very enjoyable. Enjoy painting this way, makes painting a lot easier. Now, with this, you'll see it's about getting a lot of coverage and trying to keep it fairly bright. You'll hear lots of tips about dry brushing, about like you load up the brush fully and then you wipe most of the paint off on like paper towel, that sort of thing. As you'll see, I've not really done that. I've used a tip that I picked up from Artist Opus, who's another excellent painter and very good at dry brushing. Just squirting out like a long, thin line of paint, and then taking a little bit of paint, working it into the bristles, and then it's already kind of dry, and that's fine. It's a good way to get going. As you see there's the squirt. Take it from the end, and it works really nicely. And that way, you're not wasting a lot of paint. Also, when you wipe off paint onto paper towel, it soaks up the liquid in the paint first, and obviously the pigment doesn't get soaked up or absorbed into the paper towel, and that's how you end up with kind of a chalky effect, and you don't really want the chalky effect. You want it to be smooth and consistent. So as you can see, it's the best. You can also go slightly heavier in places and lighter in places, the bits that you really want to shine. So you've seen there, the guy with a golden mask on, Obviously, you want that to be bright and gleaming, and it's his face, it's the bit you want to look at. In this, we're also going to be doing a bit of object source lighting. So I'm using some white paint because this person, whose name I will tell you in a little while, I think this is actually Zandir. This person is holding a lamp, and also the back of their cape is white, so it needs to be lighter. Even though it's in the shadows, it needs to just be a bit lighter for when I'm painting it. It's not going to be perfectly bright white because it is still in the shadows a little bit. I'm just adding lighter colours where they need to be placed. And that's the thing, you have a choice of... I really like putting the effort in with this value sketching stage because you have a choice of where the light goes. That it's a lot easier just to work in black and white and not have to think about the colours at this stage, because then you can just pick colours that will pop over the top of it afterwards. Here, by just working in black, white and grey, you can really just think about how bright something needs to be and how dark something needs to be, and not try and pick out the colours at the same time. Here you'll see I'm using the brush provided by Games Workshop. This brush, I can't remember what this brush is for specifically, but it's not for dry brushing. But you see it's quite long, it's quite thin, and it's quite good by doing a dry brush approach just to catch the edges there. I think I'm going to do a video about this style of dry brushing as well, because it's just a different way of doing it. You get slightly different results. Now, any tips that you hear, any instructions that you find, those are all potential ways of painting, but you can find different ways that work for you and work really well and effectively. I'm always looking for ways which is going to cut my time down, because I really enjoy painting lots of minis. I enjoy getting things done with a reasonable speed. Here I'm just using some water to wipe down my glass palette, wet everything that's on there, wipe it off with a paper towel. It's all good to go again. Glass palettes are excellent for that. Now, here I've got several colours. These are speed paints from Vallejo, I think. Vallejo Army Painter, whoever does the speed paints. Very similar to contrast paints, but since at this stage GW hadn't provided me with a single contrast paint, I'm going with the Vallejo ones instead. And as you can see here, the recesses, all that work we did with the shading, the recesses are much darker. So when you apply the contrast paint, and here I'm applying it quite thinly, or the speed paint, I'm applying it quite thinly. You can see that in the recesses it naturally goes darker. I've applied it a bit too thickly there, but that's okay. Just spread it around, move the paint around. The lighter parts appear lighter, the darker parts appear darker, but it's all just one paint. It's just one single shade. Here I'm using a dry brush, and I'm actually just working it into the bristles a bit. I'm just trying to see how that goes, because now I'm not dry brushing with it, I'm just using a dry brush. But I just want to show you what the difference is and if you can do anything like this. And what I have noticed doing this is that you can quickly get quite an even spread of colour by using these soft round domed brushes, as opposed to the thinner, more traditional brushes, I guess. But it gives you a much less streaky result. It gives you a softer result, but that also helps the lighter parts really pop, especially those creases. You can see there it doesn't take very long at all, and the depth is just much quicker. But you'll see that it's perhaps not quite as strong and with as much contrast as the efforts with the other brushes that we've used before. The really thin brushes here are really helpful for getting those details without accidentally making mistakes. That's what the thin brushes are helpful for. Sometimes you might think, well, a thin brush, that's going to take ages to paint it, but actually it can be a lot quicker because there are less mistakes that you need to rectify. See here, lots of little details here and there that we can just add just with a tiny brush, quite thin. I also, as you saw there, like to pick up just enough paint to wet the tip of the brush, not go all the way down to the brush. The paint should never be touching the ferrule of the brush anyway, but GW recommend the paint go down like about halfway. I think that's too much, and the reason I like it going to the tip of the brush is because you can then accidentally touch other parts of the model with the length of the brush, but it doesn't have any effect. Now you see here I'm adding a bit of OSL. So because I've painted the lantern very bright, the yellow is now looking incredibly bright as well. And also because I've done a bit of dry brushing where I'd expect the lamp to be glowing against Xandir's cloak, I can add a bit of yellow on top of that, and that's going to glow even further. Once I've done that, I'll go back to get some white. Here you can see I'm mixing in a little bit of white with that contrast paint. That's going to remove the opacity of the paint, but I don't need it to be opaque anymore. I don't need it to be translucent because it's going to go over the top of what we've already covered, just to show a bit of brightness and glare, a bit of extra light there. I'm not really being tremendously careful about where it goes, just trying to show that brightness. And also a bit on the armor, it's going to bounce off, be quite reflective. The places you expect the light to be catching. And there you can see, I think that's pretty impressive for very minimal work. Once again, always looking for quick tips. Don't worry about it being slightly off kilter here. You're just going to have to cock your head to the side. Now, this is something else I'm doing to really push the OSL, is I'm going in with some darker shades and darker tones and going into the recesses and trying to put them quite close to those lighter, bright parts, because that's going to make the brightness, it's going to give the illusion of the light bouncing off of things a lot more pop, creating that contrast of the dark shade with the light shade really makes it stand out. It's been a while since I looked at this actually, and actually recorded this several months ago, and must say it looks good. It does, if I do say so myself. I'm very happy with how this turned out actually. All right, I don't think I've actually given a shout out to the Golden Lemon Network yet in the video, so I'm going to do that now. I'm part of a network called the Golden Lemon Network. I mentioned Don Serratos earlier. It's a group basically coming out of his patron account, or maybe his followers and subscribers. He has a Discord, which he refers to as the Golden Lemon Network, and now there are other creators in his Discord, and we've all banded together to kind of push that together and promote each other. It's a group of really excellent painters and artists, and of course Don Serratos being one of the being an excellent painter himself. And if you come and join our network, or if you want to come and find us on Discord, you can find a description below, and it'll be a great community with a lot of people there to provide tips for painting, for crafting, all that sort of thing. So you should come and get signed up. Now, here I am. I painted the bird already. I didn't have a lot there. Now, this is the two guys I was telling you about. The swamp color shaman from episode 9 and his friend who stirs the pot. Whatever he does. We've got to pick the right colors for their skin, but I've done it in very much the same way. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of object source lighting going on here. It's pretty much just from the top down. So that's something. Here I'm just mixing a couple of contrast paint colors together. I really like mixing these colors because sometimes you mix them together, the speed paints, and they just get even more vibrant. So just picking out some of the face. As you can see, the lighter bits are really popping and the darker bits are looking a lot darker and richer, which is exactly what you want. And it takes no time at all to paint to an excellent standard like this. This style is also kind of referred to as slap chop. Slap chop is, I don't know too much about it, to be honest, but I know the term was coined by Rob, the Honest Wargamer. I'm sure you've all seen that video before. It's a way, he's just trying to express how easy it is and quick it can be to paint to a pretty good standard. And he demonstrated that really effectively. Since then, there's been loads of videos about slap chop, kind of trying to jump on the zeitgeist and the bandwagon and showing lots of different things you can do with it and how you can push it further. And slap chop 2.0, slap chop 3.0, which kind of gets away from the point Rob was trying to make, was about how simple and straightforward it is and anyone can paint really well. And it is effectively, like I said earlier, setting up your minis to be colored in. just got to stay in the lines at that point, pick colours, and it will look excellent. Whereas these more sophisticated versions of it are really doing a lot with it and using other techniques, layering it in somewhere else. And a lot of miniature painters will use that style as part of their process now. It doesn't mean it's going to be the only thing that they do. And that's the same for me, really. It's a big part of what I do because it gets the model to a really decent standard really quickly. And then you can use any extra time you have or any extra interest you have to practice that a bit more. So I think that's something certainly to be considered. Other things to pick out, I'm using a really thin brush here to try and pick out lots of little details, different colours. I'm doing my best to kind of copy the box art to some extent, but I'm not worried about the exact shades of everything. I just want to try and get it looking pretty similar. Right, let's see if I can tell you a bit about these fellas. Swamp Color Shaman, and his friend is called Potgrot, just seen. They are foul Auruks who wield the magical power of Mork in battle. No. Through wicked hexes, bubbling potions, and shadowy spells, they baffle their enemy, bolster allies, and torture the very land itself. Swampy muck follows in the wake of these wizards. Swamp Color Shamans are masters of dark and mysterious swamp lore. They have a deep connection with the marshes where the cruel boys live, and they use the slithering creatures found within to brew incredibly toxic potions. These concoctions are used to poison the land itself. When a Swamp Color Shaman's brew is applied to magical ley lines in the mortal realms, it causes foul swamps to bubble up from the ground. Enemies panic as the earth beneath them turns into a sucking mire. Ugh. Sounds disgusting. Now, there are a lot of things you can do with your character traits for these. There's a rolling table. You roll a d6. You could choose how a Swamp Color Shaman swimps in the deepest, darkest bogs in an effort to learn the hidden secrets, or they brew even more potent potions, or some other stuff, whatever. Just showing you here how easy it is to blend, actually. I think we just missed out on that, but there was some potions spilling out from his pot. With speed paints, very easy to blend if you can just be quick about them. Get both colours you want to blend out on the palette. Have a pot of water next to you. Pop the top colour in. Quickly wash it off, and you see they're starting with red, working down, and then I wanted to blend it into the purple, so I got the purple and I blended up from the bottom, or I painted up from the bottom and then kind of blended it in the middle. Use a bit of water to mix it together and you're good to go. Some very nice, easy transitional blending, which is the sort of thing where if I had have seen it painted previously without ever having painted before, I would think, what is going on there? How can I achieve anything even close to that? Well, actually, it's not that hard. Once you see, especially with these new contrast paints. Here we're doing a little bit of object source lighting, trying to make that potion look a bit more glowy. Glowy is a technical term. So I'm just putting some highlights of white around the edges and on his arms. So we're ready to do that. And then taking some of the colour of the potion itself, very lightly brushing upwards, because that's where the light from the potion, if it were glowing, would come from, and a bit around the edges to show that glow. I'm not as happy with this result as the other one from Zandir. Zandir, I thought that glow turned out really well, but I think it's okay. It's good enough, and there they are, finished. I think pretty nice, pretty detailed, good stuff. They're very dramatic. They pop really nicely. And here they are with some really bad lighting. So I hope you found this video informative and picked up some tidbits, found it entertaining, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.